contacts with the members of the United Nations, and certainly we will try our best to have something done by the United Nations to stop this genocide against the Libyan people.
Let's just give you an idea of how the cracks are now showing in the Gaddafi regime. A number of Libyan diplomats have resigned, including ambassadors to the Arab League and India, as well as 4 diplomats in China in the last hour. The Libyan embassy in Malaysia has called the crackdown barbaric and criminal. Libya's Justice Minister Mustafa AlJazeera has already quit over the use of deadly force against protesters. 2 senior Libyan Air Force officers have defected to Malta after reportedly being ordered to bomb protesters. Well, joining me now is Youssef Bouandal, joins me from Doha at the International Affairs, at the Professor of International Affairs at Qatar University. Thank you for joining us again. You've been following events for us, not just today, but throughout the past few weeks. We now see a very important day in terms of diplomatic activity, both in New York and in Cairo. It's a long time to wait, maybe another 6-7 hours before the UN Security Council sits. What do you expect to happen in Cairo with the Arab League?
Well, I think the Arab League would do 2 things. The first one is will make a statement condemning what has been happening in Libya over the last few days, and secondly, maybe offer some sort of advice to Colonel Gaddafi to find a peaceful settlement and maybe to find an honourable way out. That's all I expect from them.
We're also now hearing of a rash of resignations in the diplomatic community as regards to Libya. And earlier I spoke to the Libyan ambassador to India, who said that independently of the media and of the internet, he spoke to eyewitness reports, his neighbours, his friends in Libya, talking about the carnage that was being described to him. How damaging now is this for Mr. Gaddafi, and will he act on it in any way? How can he recover from this?
Well, I don't think he will act on it, and his son, in his speech a couple of days ago, as his official spokesman or unofficial spokesman, said that he would fight until the last bullet, until the last man and woman. Obviously, the high-ranking diplomats who have defected or who have resigned their jobs have their own channels of communications with Libya, and they have not taken those decisions lightly given the brutality of Gaddafi's regime. I think that as days go by or hours go by, we will hear more resignations from different people in Libya, and that will damage the credibility, I'm not saying legitimacy, of Colonel Gaddafi's regime.
Colonel Gaddafi has survived an isolationist policy before. What's different this time is that the people themselves, from within, seem to be rising up against him. How long do you think he can survive in this predicament?
Well, two things. I think he has been in isolation throughout the 90s, and the world has changed since 9/11, September 9/11. In the eyes of his own people, he was the victim, and the Libyan people were the victim. But this time around, he would not survive it because his own people are against him. I believe that within the next couple of weeks, we will see the demise of Gaddafi's regime.
And in terms of stability across North Africa or even the Gulf, is this the end of it, do you think? Or, again, do we have to look at other countries that could be unstable in this particular scenario?
We will have to look at other countries, and I can see perhaps Yemen going toward that way, and probably Iraq. I think other countries are under pressure, like Jordan, for instance, Morocco, Algeria are under pressure from the streets, but the pressure is not as strong as it has shown in Libya. And I think that the Arab leaders throughout the region should take lessons from what has been going on and try to open up the political space in order to avoid more bloodshed.
We shall see what happens in the certainly coming hours, days and weeks there. Mr. Bouandal, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Expatriates from Libya have been leaving the country in their droves. The Italians are no exception. Italy says it's to begin airlifting its citizens out of the country on Tuesday. But many Italians aren't waiting for rescue. Flights arriving in Rome have been packed with people fleeing the violence. Emeke Amulu has more.
Italian expatriates return home. Relatives relieved they've escaped the worst. The media, however, want to know their stories, hoping for some clarity on events in Libya. All they get is an even more confusing picture.
almeno in questo momento non è.
Tripoli at the moment, at least, is not in the hands of the army. Most soldiers, anyway, are in favour of Gaddafi. At least that's what people say. Yet it is a very unpredictable situation.
Life carries on normally, except some people who say, long live Gaddafi, and others who say, down with Gaddafi. After dark, you have more people coming out who invoke the uprising. But from what I could see, the stories of mercenaries chopping hands and so on are nothing but urban legends.
We heard shootings and lots of confusion in town. Also, we heard that 5,000 people were on their way to Tripoli from Benghazi. But there is no official news because there is no press. So who knows? Anyway, the little that is known doesn't look good at all.
And this Serbian citizen who works in Libya says on the way to the airport there were civilians with guns on every corner. But unlike those coming from Tripoli, the Turkish expats who left the city of Benghazi hours earlier were visibly shaken.
Our construction site was ransacked by local people on Saturday night at about 3:15 in the morning. We were all ready for a situation like this. Everybody was sleeping in their daytime clothes.
A short while later, men, women and children on the Mercy flight are back on home soil. But many more remain in Benghazi. One witness has told journalists that thousands of Turks are taking refuge in a football stadium, waiting to be evacuated. Emiko Molu, AlJazeera.
Let's just bring you some news coming from Reuters, and an Egyptian military source is saying that rulers there will reinforce the border between Libya and Egypt. That's an Egyptian military source saying that they will reinforce the border between Libya and Egypt. Of course, Egypt having had its own problems in the past few weeks. We'll bring you more on that. We have our correspondent, Shireen Tadros, in the capital as we get it. Well, Egypt has opened up its border with the Gaza Strip. The move provides some mobility to Palestinians who haven't had any since the start of the revolt that overthrew Hosni Mubarak. We'll have a live report from the border. And 1,700 days and counting will update you on the plight of captured Israeli soldier Gilad Shalit.
He's taken stolen goods and he's now dumping them onto the world without any sort of consideration for consequences.
From people making the news.
If the North will be saved a lot of trouble, I think it is important that they should come together.
To those it affects.
We do accept that there was very bad mistakes made in our banking area.
Behind the headlines.
Most South Koreans are not interested in reunification.
Is the inside story at this time on Al Jazeera.
Afghanistan is faced with a huge challenge.
Relations have gone really sour between us and our allies.
We have inflicted considerable damage on the enemy.
The people who make international headlines.
Ultimately, the truth will out.
They want to stop this publication of information that embarrasses them.
Make time for Sir David Frost. Frost over the world. At this time on Al Jazeera.